Good evening, and welcome to Doctorpiece Theater. My name is Dr. Dennis Business. And tonight is exactly what we've been waiting for. Dante turns from the thieves towards the evil counselors of the next Bolgia, and between the two, he addresses a passionate lament to Florence, prophesying the griefs that will befall her from these two sins. At the purported time of the vision, it will be recalled, Dante was a chief magistrate of Florence, and was forced into exile by men he had reason to consider both thieves and evil counselors. He seems prompted, in fact, to say much more on this score, but restrains himself when he comes in sight of the sinners of the next Bolgia, for they are a moral symbolism. All men of gift who abused their genius, perverting it to wiles and stratagems. Seeing them in hell, he knows his must be another road. His way shall not be deception. So the poets move on, and Dante observes the eighth Bolgia in detail. Here, the evil counselors move about endlessly, hidden from view inside great flames. Their sin was to abuse the gifts of the Almighty, to steal his virtues for low purposes. And as they stole from God in their lives and worked by hidden ways, so are they stolen from sight and hidden in the great flames which are their own guilty consciences. And as, in most instances at least, they sinned by glibness of tongue, so are the flames made into a fiery travesty of tongues. Among the others, the poets see a great double-headed flame, and discover that Ulysses and Diomed are punished together within it. Virgil addresses the flame, and through its wavering tongue, Ulysses narrates an unforgettable tale of his last voyage and death. Joy to you, Florence, that your banners swell, beating their proud wings over land and sea, and that your name expands through all of hell. Among the thieves, I found 5 who had been your citizens. To my shame, nor yet shall you mount to great honor peopling such a dent. But if the truth is dreamed of towards the morning, you shall feel what Prato and the others wish for you. And were that day of morning already come, it would not be too soon. So it may come, since it must, for it will weigh more heavily on me as I pass my noon. We left that place. My guide climbed stone by stone the natural stair by which we had descended, and drew me after him. So we passed on, and going our lonely way, through that dead land among the crags and crevices of the cliff, the foot could make no way without the hand. I mourned among those rocks, and I mourn again when memory returns to what I saw, and more than usually I curb the strain of my genius, lest it stray from virtue's course. So if some star or a better thing grant me merit, may I not find the gift cause for remorse. As many fireflies as the peasant sees when he rests on a hill and looks into the valley, where he tills or gathers grapes or prunes his trees, in that sweet season, when the face of him who lights the world rides north, and at the hour when the fly yields to the gnat and the air grows dim, such myriads of flames I saw shine through the gloom of the eighth abyss when I arrived at the rim from which its bed comes into view. As he the bears avenged so fearfully beheld Elijah's chariot depart, the horses rise towards heaven, but could not see more than the flame, a cloudlet in the sky. Once it had ridden, so within the fosse only those flames, forever passing by. Master, I said, Your words make me more sure, but I had already seen that it was so, and I meant to ask what spirit must endure the pains of that great flame, which splits away into two great horns, as if it rose from the pyre where Eteocles and Polynices lay. He answered me, "Forever round this path Ulysses and Diomed move in such dress, united in pain, as once they were in wrath. There they lament the ambush of the horse, which was the door through which the noble seed of the Romans issued from its holy source. There they mourn that for Achilles' slain sweet Deidamia weeps even in death. There they recall the Palladium in their pain." "Master," I cried, "I pray you, and re-pray till my prayer becomes 1,000, if these souls can speak from the fire. Oh, let me stay until the flame draws near. Do not deny me. You see how fervently I long for it." And he to me, "Since what you ask is worthy, it shall be. But be still, and let me speak, for I know your mind already, and they perhaps might scorn your manner of speaking, since they were Greek." And when the flame had come where time and place seemed fitting to my guide, I heard him say these words to it: "O you two souls who pace together in one flame, if my days above won favor in your eyes, if I have earned however much or little of your love in writing my high verses, do not pass by, but let one of you be pleased to tell where he, having disappeared from the known world, went to die." As if it fought the wind, the greater prong of the ancient flame began to quiver and hum. Then, moving its tip as if it were the tongue that spoke, gave out a voice above the roar. "When I left Circe," it said, "who more than a year detained me near Gaeta, long before Aeneas came and gave that place a name, not fondness for my son, nor reverence to my aged father, not Penelope's claim to the joys of love, could drive out of my mind the lust to experience the far-flung world and the failings and felicities of mankind. I put out on the high and open sea with a single ship, and only those few souls who stayed true when the rest deserted me. As far as Morocco and as far as Spain I saw both shores, and I saw Sardinia and the other islands of the open main. I and my men were stiff and slow with age, when we sailed at last into the narrow pass where, warning all men back from further voyage, Hercules' pillars rose upon our sight. Already I had left Ceuta on the left. Seville now sank behind me on the right. "Shipmates," I said, "who through 100,000 perils have reached the west, do not deny to the brief remaining, watch our senses stand experience of the world beyond the sun. Greeks, you were not born to live like brutes, but to press on towards manhood and recognition." With this brief exhortation, I made my crew so eager for the voyage, I could hardly have held them back from it when I was through. And turning our stern towards morning, our bow towards night, we bore southwest out of the world of man. We made wings of our oars for our fool's flight. That night, we raised the other pole ahead with all its stars, and ours had so declined it did not rise out of its ocean bed. 5 times since we had dipped our bending oars beyond the world, the light beneath the moon had waxed and waned, when dead upon our course we sighted, dark in space, a peak so tall I doubt any man had seen the like. Our cheers were hardly sounded, when a squall broke hard upon our bow from the new land. 3 times it sucked the ship and the sea about as it pleased another to order and command. At the 4th, the poop deck rose, and the bow went down till the sea closed over us, and the light was gone. The double flame departs at a word from Virgil, and behind it appears another which contains the soul of Count Guido de Montefeltro. a lord of Romagna. He had overheard Virgil speaking Italian, and the entire flame in which his soul is wrapped quivers with his eagerness to hear recent news of his wartime country. As Farionata has already explained, the spirits of the damned have prophetic powers, but lose all track of events as they approach. Dante replies with a stately and tragic summary of how things stand in the cities of Romagna. When he finishes, he asks Guido for his story, and Guido recounts his life and how Pope Boniface VIII persuaded him to sin. Evil counselors. When it had finished speaking, the great flame stood tall and shook no more. Now, as it left us with the sweet poet's license, another came along that track, and our attention turned to the new flame. A strange and muffled roar rose from the single tip to which it burned. As the Sicilian bull, that brazen spit which bellowed first, and properly enough, with a lament of him whose file had tuned it, was made to bellow by its victims' cries in such a way that though it was of brass, it seemed itself to howl and agonize. So lacking any way through or around the fire that sealed them in, the mournful words were changed into its language. When they found their way up to the tip, imparting it to the same vibration given them in their passage over the tongue of the concealed sad spirit, we heard it say, "O you at whom I aim my voice, and who were speaking Lombard, saying, 'Go now, I ask no more, just as I came. Though I may come a bit late to my turn, may it not annoy you to pause and speak a while. You see it does not annoy me, and I burn. If you have fallen only recently to this blind world from that sweet Italy where I acquired my guilt, I pray you tell me, is there peace or war in Romagna? For on earth I too was of those hills between Urbino and the fold from which the Tiber springs to birth." I was still staring at it from the dim edge of the pit when my guide nudged me, saying, "This one is Italian. You speak to him." My answer was framed already. Without pause, I spoke these words to it. "O hidden soul, your sad Romagna is not, and never was without war in her tyrant's raging blood, but none flared openly when I left just now. Ravenna's fortunes stand as they have stood these many years. Polenta's eagles brood over her walls, and their pinions cover Servia. The city that so valiantly withstood the French and raised a mountain of their dead feels the green claws again. Still, in Veruscio, the aged mastiff and his pup who shed Montagna's blood raven in their old ranges. The cities of Limone and Santero are led by the white den's lion, he who changes his politics with the compass, and as the city the Savio washes lies between plain and mountain, so it lives between freedom and tyranny. Now, I beg you, let us know your name. Do not be harder than one has been on you, so, too, you will preserve your earthly fame." And when the flame had roared a while beneath the ledge on which we stood, it swayed its tip to and fro, and then gave forth this breath. "If I believed that my reply were made to one who could ever climb to the world again, this flame would shake no more. But since no shade ever returned, if what I am told is true, from this blind world into the living light, without fear of dishonor I answer you. I was a man of arms, then took the rope of the Franciscans, hoping to make amends, and surely I should have won to all my hope but for the great priest, may he rot in hell, who brought me back to all my earlier sins. And how and why it happened I wish to tell in my own words. While I was still encased in the pulp and bone my mother bore, my deeds were not of the lion but of the fox. I raced through tangled ways, all wiles were mine from birth, and I won to such advantage with my arts that rumor of me reached the ends of the earth. But when I saw before me all the signs of the time of life that cautions every man to lower his sail and gather in his lines, that which had pleased me once troubled my spirit, and penitent and confessed, I became a monk. Alas, what joy I might have had of it! It was then the prince of the new Pharisees drew his sword and marched upon the Latran, and not against the Saccharin or the Jew. For every man who stood against his hand was a Christian soul. Not one had warred on Acre, nor had been a traitor in the Sultan's lands. It was he abused his sacred vows and mine, his office and the court I wore, which once made those it girded leaner. As Constantine sent for Silvestro to cure his leprosy, seeking him out among Socrates' cells, so this one, from his great throne, sent for me to cure the fever of pride that burned his blood. He demanded my advice, and I kept silent, for his words seemed drunken to me. So it stood until he said, Your soul need fear no wound. I absolve your guilt beforehand, and now teach me how to smash Penestrino to the ground. The gates of heaven, as you know, are mine to open and shut, for I hold the two great keys so easily let go by Pope Celestine. His weighty arguments led me to fear silence was worse than sin. Therefore, I said, Holy Father, since you clean me here of the guilt into which I fall, let it be done. Long promise and short observance is the road that leads to the sure triumph of your throne. Later, when I was dead, St. Francis came to claim my soul, but one of the black angels said, Leave him. Do not wrong me. This one's name went into my book the moment he resolved to give false counsel. Since then, he has been mine. For who does not repent cannot be absolved, nor can we admit the possibility of repenting a thing at the same time it is willed, for the two acts are contradictory. Miserable me! With what contrition I shuddered when he lifted me, saying, Perhaps you hadn't heard that I was a logician. He carried me to Minos. 8 times around his scabby back, the monster coiled his tail. Then biting it in rage, he pawed the ground and cried, This one is for the thievish fire. And, as you can see, I am lost accordingly, grieving in heart as I go in this attire. His story told, the flame began to toss and writhe its horn. And so it left, and we crossed over to the arch of the next fosse, where, from the iron treasury of the Lord, the fee of wrath is paid the sowers of discord. The poets come to the edge of the 9th Bolgia and look down at a parade of hideously mutilated souls. They are the sowers of discord, and just as their sin was to rend asunder what God had meant to be united, so they are hacked and torn through all eternity by a great demon with a bloody sword. After each mutilation, the souls are compelled to drag their broken bodies around the pit and return to the demon. For in the course of the circuit, their wounds knit in time to be inflicted anew. Thus is the law of retribution observed, each sinner suffering according to his degree. Among them, Dante distinguishes 3 classes with varying degrees of guilt within each class. First come the sowers of religious discord. Mahomet is chief among them, and appears first, cleft from crotch to chin, with his internal organs dangling between his legs. His son-in-law, Ali, drags on ahead of him, cleft from top knot to chin. These reciprocal wounds symbolize Dante's judgment that, between them, these two sum up the total schism between Christianity and Mohammedanism. The revolting details of Mahomet's condition clearly imply Dante's opinion of that doctrine. Mahomet issues an ironic warning to another schismatic, Fra Dulcino. Next come the sowers of political discord. Among them, Pier de Messina, the tribune Curio, and Mosca di Lamberti, each mutilated according to the nature of his sin. Last of all is Bertrand de Born, sower of discord between kinsmen. He separated father from son, and for that offense carries his head separated from his body, holding it with one hand by the hair and swinging it as if it were a lantern to light his dark and endless way. The image of Bertrand raising his head at arm's length in order that it might speak more clearly to the poets on the ridge is one of the most memorable in the Inferno. For some reason that cannot be ascertained, Dante makes these sinners quite eager to be remembered in the world, despite the fact that many who lie above them in hell were unwilling to be recognized. Who could describe, even in words set free of metric and rhyme and 1,000 times retold, the blood and wounds that were now shown to me? At grief so deep the tongue must wag in vain, the language of our sense and memory lacks the vocabulary of such pain. If one could gather all those who have stood through all time on Puglia's faithful soil and wept for the red running of their blood in the war of the Trojans, and in that long war, which left so vast a spoil of golden rings as we find written in Livy, who does not err, along with those whose bodies felt the wet and gaping wounds of Robert Guiscard's lances, with all the rest whose bones are gathered yet at Caperano, where every last Pugliese turned traitor, and with those from Tagliacozzo, where Alardro won without weapons. If all of these were gathered, and one showed his limbs run through, another lopped off, that could not equal the mutilations of the ninth pit's crew. A wine tun, when a stave or camp bar starts, does not split open as wide as one I saw split from his chin to the mouth with which man farts. Between his legs, all his red guts hung with the heart, the lungs, the liver, the gallbladder, and the shriveled sack that passes shit to the bung. I stood and stared at him from the stone shelf. He noticed me, and opening his own breast with both hands, cried, "See how I rip myself? See how Mahomet's mangled and split open? Ahead of me walks Ali in his tears, his head cleft from the top knot to the chin. And all the other souls that bleed and mourn along this ditch were sowers of scandal and schism. As they tore others apart, so are they torn. Behind us, warden of our mangled horde, the devil who butchers us and sends us marching, waits to renew our wounds with his long sword when we have made the circuit of the pit. For by the time we stand again before him, all the wounds he gave us have knit. But who are you that gawk from that ledge? Probably to put off your own descent to the pit that you are sentenced for your own evil? Death has not come for him. Guilt does not drive his soul to torment," my sweet guide replied, "that he may experience all while yet alive. I, who am dead, must lead him through the drear and darkened halls of hell, from round to round, and this is as true as my own standing here." More than 100 wraiths were marching under the sill on which we stood, paused at his words, and stared at me, forgetting pain in wonder. "And if you do return to see the sun again, and soon, tell Fra Dolcino, unless he longs to come and march with me, he would do well to check his groceries before the winter drives him from the hills and gives the victory to the Novaris." Mahomet, one foot raised, had paused to say these words to me. When he had finished speaking, he stretched it out and down and moved away. Another, he had his throat slit and his nose slashed off as far as the eyebrows, and a wound where one of his ears had been, standing but those who stared at me in wonder from the pit, opened the grinning wound of his red gullet as if it were a mouth, and said through it, "O soul unforfeited to misery, and whom, unless I take you for another, I have seen above in our sweet Italy. If ever again you see the gentle plain that slopes down from Vercelli to Macabro, remember Pier de Messina in pain, and announce this warning to the noblest two of Fano, Messrs. Guido and Angiello, that unless our foresight sees what is not true, they shall be thrown from their ships into the sea and drown in the raging tides near Catalica to satisfy a tyrant's treachery.
Neptune never saw so gross a crime in all the seas from Cyprus to Majorca, not even in pirate raids, nor the Argive time. The one-eyed traitor, the lord of the domain, whose hill and streams one who walks here beside me will wish eternally he had never seen, will call them to a parley, but behind sweet invitations he will work it so they need not pray against Phorcara's wind. And I to him, if you would have me bear your name to time, show me the one who found the sight of that land so harsh, and let me hear his story and his name. He touched the cheek of one nearby, forcing the jaws apart, and said, This is the one. He cannot speak. This outcast settled Caesar's doubts the day beside the Rubicon by telling him, a man prepared is a man hurt by delay. Ah, how wretched Curio seemed to me, with a bloody stump in his throat in place of the tongue, which once had dared to speak so recklessly. And one among them, with both arms hacked through, cried out, raising his stumps on the foul air, while the blood bedaubed his face, Remember, too, Mosca de Lamberti, alas, who said, A thing done has an end, and with those words planted the fields of war with Tuscan dead, and brought about the death of all your clan, I said, and he, stung by new pain on pain, ran off, and in his grief he seemed a madman. I stayed to watch those broken instruments, and saw a thing so strange. I should not dare to mention it without more evidence, but that my own clear conscience strengthens me, that good companion that upholds a man within the armor of his purity. I saw it there. I seemed to see it still, a body without a head that moved along like all the others in that spew and spill. It held the severed head by its own hair, swinging it like a lantern in its hand, and the head looked at us and wept in despair. It made itself a lamp of its own head, and there were two in one and one in two. How can this be? He knows who so commanded. And when it stood directly under us, it raised the head at arm's length towards our bridge, the better to be heard, and swaying thus it cried, O living soul in this abyss, see what a sentence has been passed upon me. Search all hell for one equal to this. When you return to the world, remember me. I am Bertrand de Born, and I was who set the young king on to mutiny, son against father, father against son. And since I parted those who should be one in duty and love, I bear my brain, divided from its source, within this trunk, and walk here when my evil turns to pain. An eye for all eternity. Thus is the law of hell observed in me.